Okay, but without further ado, I guess we'll get started. So, welcome to Jewish Mysticism Lessons in Tanya, chapter 30. The last class in our course of negative emotions. We're going to take a break, I think, for 1 week maybe, or 2 weeks, I don't remember. I'll keep you guys posted in the email. And then we're going to start positive emotions. But for today, we're still in negative emotions. This is the last point that the Alter Rebbe wants to mention on negative emotions. And it's titled How Not to Judge Others. Definitely a negative emotion, right? Being judgmental of other people.
Absolutely.
Putting other people in a box. You know, this is who they are, this is who I am. Comparing yourself to other people, etc. We're gonna dive right into it. We're on page 340 in the Practical Tanya. And in the handout, you should have chapter 30, How Not to Judge Others, this handout. And an interesting sidebar, like an interesting fact about this chapter, is that this chapter was not included in the original manuscript. We have discussed in the past that Tanya was originally written, right? This is pre-printing press, or right around the time when the printing. Tanya was written in the 1700s, mm-hmm. And even if printing was around, it definitely wasn't a commonality. And it took until, I think, the 1800s. No, I apologize. In the 1600s, the Tanya was written. It took until the 1700s for the Tanya to be printed for the first time in a city called Slavuta, which is in the Ukraine, in western Ukraine. I actually was in that city. There is nothing left of what was once the Shapiro Brothers printing press, where the Tanya was printed. The Nazis bombed it all out. Now it's just an empty field. But all the Jews in the town, there aren't that many of them, they know this is where the printing press used to be, and the Hasidim all value it because the Tanya was printed there. And one of the very popular versions of the Gemara was printed there for the first time. So this was like when these were mavericks of Jewish literature, because they were bringing a lot of works of Judaism that were just hand copied from person to person to person to person and printing them.
And not accepted necessarily in the entirety of Judaism.
Not accepted in the entirety of Judaism? What do you mean? What wasn't accepted?
Like Tanya wasn't accepted for...
Well, Tanya was new. I mean, lots of very old. The Gemara, the Talmud, they were printing them for the first time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so came the year... What year was the Tanya printed? 1812, I think? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe 1812 was the year the Alter Rebbe passed away, maybe? Let's see. Either way. I think it was in the 1700s. Late 1700s.
If I was around, I don't remember.
What was that?
If I was around, I don't remember.
Yeah, maybe it's a little fuzzy. Here. He wrote the Tanya in 1772, 73, around then it seems. That's when it was written. Anyways, without placing too much emphasis on the dates, so when the Tanya was printed for the first time, this chapter did not exist. And the Alter Rebbe included this chapter, added it in as they printed it. Which to me was an interesting thing to read.
So in the second edition, it was...
In the first print edition.
Yeah, but in the second printed edition, then it wasn't included?
No, in the first printed edition this was included. The Tanya wasn't originally printed.
I see, okay.
The Tanya was composed and copied from person to person. As a matter of fact, this was taken advantage of by many people, that they would insert, like Besnagdim, those who had controversial opposition to the Tanya, would insert erroneous text purposely in order to spread slanderous rumors about the Hasidim or whatever it was. This was part of the whole battle then. Anyways, that's just an interesting sidebar about this chapter of Tanya. But on to the actual content of the chapter. So, the Rebbe opens up by bringing a quote from the Mishnah in Masechta Avot, in Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of Our Fathers, where it says, "V'hevei shfal ruach b'fnei kol adam." You should be humble in spirit before everyone. Now, this is an interesting statement, because everyone is a very, very broad term, right? Everyone includes adults and children. Everyone includes people that are the biggest tzaddikim, and then the biggest opposite, right? I mean, we don't like to think about it, but Hitler goes into the category of everyone. Right? Everyone goes into the category of everyone. So how can the Mishnah tell us, or at least what the Alter Rebbe wants to understand is, what is the right? What is the implication of be humble before everyone? Are you essentially saying that everyone is better than you? Right? Am I not better than anyone? Should I not feel a little bit on a higher level than anyone? What's about somebody who's a murderer and a rapist and a thief and a liar and a cheat? Right? And so the Alter Rebbe opens up with that. And he segues to continuing, he moves from that to continue the conversation from the previous chapters. In the previous chapters, we've introduced the fact that a person should be aware, right? Really, in the whole Tanya up until today, we've introduced the fact that a person should be aware of his emotions. A person should be aware of the fact that the body, the mind naturally controls the emotions that come into the heart. Right? The mind controls the heart naturally. You have that ability. It's up to us. Now the problem is that we don't always use that mind to actually exercise that control. Says the Alter Rebbe, one of the things to bear in mind when comparing ourselves to other people is that every person is created differently. Right? We all have a Yetzer Hara. We all have a natural impulse to do something negative. Right? That's our struggle, overcoming and overpowering that natural impulse. But what is the degree to which that natural impulse will go? Right? In other words, how powerful is it? How strong is it? How strong are those urges? How often do those urges occur? Right? In other words, every person has, and I know that as regular human beings walking around, we just call this personality or nature or natural tendencies, whatever it is. This guy's more of a heated person. This guy's more of a relaxed person, right? Talking about people, let's say, who didn't work on themselves at all. And there might be a little bit of nature, a little bit of nurture, and throughout life, people develop this personality, and sometimes that personality leans more. Right? We develop these words for them, but essentially they're all being driven by the animal soul, right? The impulse to evil. And every person has a different Yetzer Hara. Every person has a different impulse to evil. Some people have an impulse to evil which is very strong and always there. And if you ever catch them doing something straight and something appropriate, that's like, whoa, there must be a tremendous amount of effort put in, right? Because they're passionate and excited and heated people who are always drawn towards the wrong things. And some people are the opposite. Okay, that's one thing that goes into our struggle. Meaning, before we get to our struggle, these are the things we struggle with. That's number one. Number two, our circumstances, right? We all have different circumstances throughout our lives, the family that we were born into, the city that we live in, and some of those we choose and some of those we don't, and all of those affect us in some way or another, right? The friends we surround ourselves with, that's a term we like to throw around, right? But we don't surround ourselves with all of our friends. Whether you like it or not, some friends are there. We all know. Some friends are there even though you don't surround yourself with them, right? And some of those friends might have negative influences on us. So just like our impulse to evil from internal, we have our influences from our friends that come from the external, and from our surroundings, and from our city, and from our climate, right? We all know that even the climate itself affects, even if there was nobody else, no other people. But the external climate affects us as well, right? Sometimes you're in a better mood, a worse mood, and that could just depend on the weather. Obviously, there's lots of other factors, but the weather definitely plays a role. And so the Alter Rebbe reminds us of all these things in order to put things into perspective. The next time that you think about judging yourself versus someone else, remember the words of the Mishnah in the same Pirkei Avot. Al tadin et chavercha ad shetagia lemekomo. Do not judge your friend until you have stood in his place. Right? Or as you say in English, until you walk the mile in his shoes. No, in Hebrew it's just ad shetagia lemekomo, till you are in his place. But in English we say until you have walked a mile in his shoes. What are we talking about? Yes, you may be the most appropriate person. Maybe you never struggle with evil, and maybe even like the Beinoni, right? Because that's what Alter Rebbe was talking to here. You don't even struggle with it. You go about on a day-to-day basis, and you're focused, and you overpower. And every time your impulse to evil comes up, you're winning over it, etc. But who tells you that your impulse to evil is the same as someone else's impulse to evil? Right? How do you know how much you have to battle in order to do the right thing versus how much somebody else would need to battle in order to do the right thing, or even to do something a lot less than you? how much they would need a battle, right? They might be in different circumstances than you. They might have different impulses than you. They might have different natural tendencies than you. Now, this doesn't serve as an excuse for the other person. You can't say, oh, because he's more passionate, God created. No. We all know that if this person has this, then he has the power to overcome it. But at least for us, when we look at someone else, no matter who the person is in the world, every single person, to a certain degree, we can be humbled before them. Why? Because as the Torah famously tells us about Moshe Rabbeinu, who was considered Anav Mikol Ha'adam, the Torah tells us, right? The Torah tells us Moshe Rabbeinu was the humblest of all men. Which is interesting, because to most people, on the street, if you start asking them for people that have had the greatest influence on the world, in the history in general, right? Within the first 5-10 people, Moses is going to be there, right? I mean, not only did he lead the Jewish people out of Egypt and bring them to Sinai and the Torah and all that revelation and religion, right? But how many of the religions of the world come from Judaism, which essentially come from Moses originally, right? Which essentially comes from Moses, from God originally. And so how was he so humble? Meaning, where was his sense of, meaning, a lot of people, the way they look at it, they say, oh, if he was humble, then he wasn't being truthful. Because the fact of the matter is that he was greater than most people. So how could he choose to be so humble without fooling himself and lying to himself and not being honest with himself? As the Medrash explains, that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't deny the fact that he was taking the Jewish people out of Egypt. He did not deny the fact that he spoke to God on a daily basis, or that he had so many great and amazing things about him. Moshe Rabbeinu had a simple method to being humble, which is essentially the method that the Alter Rebbe is reminding us here to use, which is, if someone else had been in my shoes, they would have been doing a better job. I was born with these natural tendencies and these natural things, so for me to do it, it's easy. But if someone else would have been in my position, in other words, this has nothing to do with me. If someone else would be in my position, they would have done much better. And as a result, of course, that brought about a tremendous humility in him, right? So in this manner, the Alter Rebbe encourages us that when we look at other people, one of the most important, right, even though it doesn't serve as an excuse for the other person, but it's important to remind ourselves that inherently, naturally, the mind controls our natural impulses to evil. And the fact that maybe there's one place, whatever it is, whatever level it is, if you're the biggest tzaddik in the world, there's got to be somewhere that your mind wanders, or that you're not completely focused, and somewhere that you've got that you can become better. You can always compare that to that struggle that you have, and say, that's my struggle, and it's such a small struggle, and I can't overcome it. And someone else, maybe they have a bigger struggle. Maybe their circumstances are harder. Maybe their instincts are harder to deal with, etc.
But how can we recognize that it is evil thought? Well, sometimes when I think about it, I think, when I'm going to do it's going to be right.
Again, to your question?
I mean, like, we need to resist the evil inclination.
Right.
But sometimes what I'm doing, it seems for me like it's the right things to do.
So let's not talk about those situations for a second. What about all the cases where we know that it's the wrong thing to do, and yet it's hard not to do them?
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're going to talk actually about that, the Sur Meirah versus the Aseh Tov, the not doing something that we're not supposed to do versus the doing something that we're supposed to do. We're going to get to that in a moment. But still on the topic of not judging other people, you see, this is the biggest test of faith. This is the biggest, struggle. Like, this is what God put us here in this world for. To see if we can overpower this Yetzer Hara, right? We all know that. And the perspective that the Alter Rebbe is trying to give us is that this is an internal struggle. It's not about what you see on the outside. So, what we get to see on the outside is actions. Right? Okay, actions, words, maybe even thoughts. Right? Because someone tells you what they're thinking or whatever, or you can tell what they're thinking, whatever it is. Right? I know we don't have mental telepathy yet, but still sometimes you find yourself privy to that. But what we don't get to see is the natural impulses that a person has, and those tendencies, the struggles that they're going through, etc. And because that's where the whole struggle takes place, that's why it's never fair for us to judge someone else. One of the examples that Alter Rebbe gives is of literally, let's take physical actions. Right? So you can have two people. One of them is somebody who does Torah and mitzvot a whole day. He's busy. He's studying Torah. He's praying to God. He's meditating. He's got a passionate love for God and he fears God and he does all the mitzvot meticulously and even enhances the mitzvot. Mamish, your biggest tzaddik in the world. And then and then he struggles with whatever it is, maybe making a blessing that he should be able to have proper intent when he makes a blessing, whatever it is. Right? And you have somebody who does a lot less than him. Maybe doesn't even keep Shabbos, doesn't keep kosher, doesn't, whatever, nothing. But then, when it comes to one of these small, simple things, maybe even just making a blessing, never mind the intent in the blessing, right? He has the biggest struggle in the world to even just make it. And that's because his natural impulses to evil are stronger. Says the Alter Rebbe, who's to say, right? Why is one of them who decides that one of them is more important than the other? Who decides that this struggle is bigger than the other? I'll give you a personal anecdote, right? One of the things that I do as a rabbi is I spend my Thursdays and my Fridays. Gitti actually bakes challah every Thursday or Friday. She bakes challah. And when she bakes, usually she doubles the recipe or triples the recipe, right? So if we're at home, maybe we need a big one, some small ones, whatever. And then she makes like a dozen or 2 dozen small ones extra. And she says, okay, go on, give them out. And then I go and I visit Jews in town. Not the Jews that come to shul, not the Jews that are making Friday night dinners at home, the Jews that are not. You knock on the door, you have a challah, and it's exciting, fine. People like challah, it brings back warm memories, it's beautiful, okay. And maybe in between you get to encourage them in their Judaism and to help them connect to God, etc. Fine, beautiful. Fine, so I have lots of routes like that. Businesses that I visit where people work here, and homes, etc. Hundreds of places.
It's amazing.
And it always boggles my mind when I knock on someone's door for the first time. And I see their reaction, and I could see what's going through their head, and I know the question is coming. Here's how the conversation goes. It always goes something along these lines. Hi, can I help you? Yeah, my name is Zushi. I'm a rabbi here in town. My wife bakes challah. I wanted to drop a challah. Oh, wow, that's so nice of you. Which synagogue are you with? Oh, we're with the Chabad on Walnut and Wilson. Oh, really? Very nice. What type of synagogue is that? So I said, well, it's a synagogue that's open to everyone. Well, no, I don't know. Is it Orthodox? So I said, yeah, we run the services as an Orthodox service. Oh, well, you need to understand, I'm not so religious. I'm curious. What is your goal to make me religious? Are people that are not religious, are they welcome there at the center? So first, usually I'll share that, no, not everybody's religious there. Some people drive to shul, etc. But usually I like to whip out this line. I like to look at the person and say, well, actually, funny you should ask. I don't consider myself religious either. I say boldly, standing there, kippah on my head, sit hanging from my sides, beard right here. And after they pick their jaw up off the floor, they say, what do you mean by that? So I said, well, if you ask me, religious is like this label that we sort of tacked onto people. When really, and I think this is what the Alter Rebbe was getting to here, the word religious implies that there's some sort of level of perfection. Somebody who's not religious yet is not perfect. Right? And somebody who's religious, that's it, they've reached perfection, now they go do what they want. They're religious now. Right? The problem is that that's not what it is. I said, I look at the world more as like a spectrum of fusing completely with the divine, with godliness itself, which is impossible, and being completely disconnected from godliness, also impossible. And each of us find ourselves somewhere along that spectrum. And my goal, I said as a rabbi, is to try to help you along your journey, just like I'm along my journey, to get closer to God. And without fail, every single time, I bring the same example. I say, what makes it? I said, I have my struggles too. Yes, you're right. My struggles are not with resisting murder or not keeping Shabbos or anything great and grandiose like that. My struggles are much simpler. But why are my struggles if I overcome my struggles, why should that be worth more to God just because I happen to do A, B, C before that more than somebody else who doesn't do them? In other words, level of observance is not what it's at. If it's about the journey, if it's about connecting to Hashem, then wherever we are along that journey, our struggle is what God wants. Right? We spoke about this in the course titled Your Inner Struggle, right? About how it's all about this struggle. And God wants that struggle. He wants to see you overpower that struggle. Meaning, and this is what the Alter Rebbe is talking about with circumstances and natural impulses to evil. Take me, for example, right? Just because I don't want to pick on anybody else here, right? I was born into a religious family. So for me, keeping Shabbos, to be quite honest, is not that much of a challenge. I don't have a desire to drive my car on Shabbos. I'm not interested in going into my business on Shabbos. I was brought up that way. It's my culture. It's great. Even if it wasn't the mitzvah, I probably would still be doing it. That's the way I was brought up. So that's not where my godly connection is. Of course, God still wants me to keep Shabbos, but that's not where my connection is. My connection comes when maybe in the circles that I grow up in, it's a little harder to do something else, right? Or in my personal life, for whatever reason, it's harder to do something. That's where the struggles, and that's where the value is of connecting to Hashem through, right? And we've spoken about this before. Putting yourself aside for God, getting over your ego, getting rid of your comfort zone, getting out of your comfort zone, overcoming something, right? Overpowering the struggle. That's what it's all about. So if we had to redefine the word religious, it would be somebody who wins a struggle, somebody who's constantly trying to overcome a struggle, whatever that struggle may be, in the realm of connecting to Hashem through the things that Hashem told us that He wants. Right? So just like we said earlier, you have to designate time. So as a religious Jew, right, with this new definition of religious, the religious religion, someone who fears God, someone who is actually, right, a Jew, is someone who tries to overpower struggles. All of a sudden now, right, remember those designated times that we spoke about when you should take stock and have like a calculation of your soul, the cheshbon nefesh, right? We spoke about the bedtime Shema before retiring at night, and we spoke about once a month and once a year, etc., right? All of a sudden those times take on much more meaning. Because they're not just designated times to do A, B, C, D, but because we said it's a time of calculation of the soul, and it's a time to actually take stock and reckon with what's going on internally and at your core, all of a sudden, those are now designated fighting times. Right? Ideally, not ideally. Against our will, we spend our whole day fighting against our natural impulse to evil, right? But maybe sometimes it's not as pronounced. But at night, before you go to sleep at night, you have to actually take stock of what you did today and what was good and what was bad and how things are going. You've designated this time not to fight. So a religious person, another word for religious person would be a fighter. Someone who fights. Someone who's struggling, someone who's constantly battling, fighting the good fight. Does that make sense?
Somebody who doesn't give up.
Definitely someone who doesn't give up. Hopefully somebody who wins every once in a while. And like the Alter Rebbe says, to somebody who's very religious and very observant, let's use that word, right? Somebody who happens to observe a lot of the mitzvot and a lot of the Torah, to him it might literally be just about when you say the grace after meals, you should think about whatever, just to infuse with a little bit more meaning. That might be it. But if that's his fight, that's his fight. I know I have my fight. I'm sure everybody has their fight. Everybody on their level has their place where their Yetzer Hara butts heads with them. Their place where their natural impulse to evil goes up against the godly soul. Right?
Yeah. Just the moment you start feeling good, another thought will come and make
Right.
you feel worried. It's like constantly trying to get you out of the stage of connection to God.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't it amazing?
It's so annoying.
1 second. Isn't it amazing though that God gives us so many opportunities to overcome that struggle? Every struggle is an opportunity to overcome that struggle. Isn't it amazing that God gives us so many opportunities to overcome the struggle and to allow us to connect to Him through overpowering that struggle?
Yeah, I wish I know in the moment.
It's hard. It's hard to be present. But that's where humility comes in. You see, because when you look at someone else and you choose to say to yourself, oh, I'm by minyan every single morning, he's never there. I keep Shabbos, I'm so nice to everybody, I give so much tzedakah, what does he do, right? And that's how you compare yourself to someone else. Says the Alter Rebbe, a little perspective. How big of a deal is it for you to give so much tzedakah? You're a millionaire. This person can barely afford anything and he's still giving. The amount that he's giving hurts him more, right? Is more of a struggle for him to overcome than the millions of dollars that you have to tzedakah, right? And this can be applied to everything. Torah learning. Oh, what does this guy know about Torah learning? I'm such a much more wisdom, a much wiser and well-versed person in the Torah, and this makes me better than him. It doesn't make you better than him. Moshe was humble beyond any other man in the world, and he certainly knew more Torah than anyone else, right? He heard it from the source.
Interestingly, I think that the struggles that we individually have, the unique struggles, I'll use the word unique, are are struggles that stay with us the rest of our lives.
And that is where God is found.
Oh.
In that struggle, that's where your connection to godliness is found.
Correct.
The Alter Rebbe continues to talk about the fact that it says, there's a famous line in Tehillim which says, Sur me'ra v'aseh tov. Right? Turn from evil and do good. And all of the sages point out that this is, all of the mitzvot in the Torah are encompassed in these two categories, right? 613 mitzvahs, they're either a positive mitzvah or they're a negative mitzvah, right? Every single one is either a positive mitzvah, you're connected to God, so you're doing something that Hashem wants you to do, or you don't do something that Hashem doesn't want you to do, right? Now let's say you have somebody who even does who keeps every single one of the don'ts. He never does anything that Hashem doesn't want him to do. Who's to say that keeping a don't is any better than keeping a do? In other words, why is one more powerful than the other? Why is one considered more important than the other? It shouldn't be, right? Because we don't know how to judge mitzvahs.
He or she is struggling to
right.
keep it.
Okay, yeah. That was the first point we made. Now he's moving on to another point. Even do's and don'ts can't really be compared to each other. You see, humility, true humility, any intelligent person who's honest with themselves should be able to find a moment of humility with any person under the sun. I know I brought Hitler Yimach Shemaya as an example, right? But I only bring him because that's the worst person we could ever imagine, right? With his fellow Yimach Shemo who went into Pittsburgh and did what he did, right? The point is, however, I don't think we ever need to compare ourselves to these kind of people, right? They're literally from Shalosh Klippos Atmeos. But an intelligent person can always find somewhere, because they know their struggle and they know what makes their fight tick. It might be bigger, it might be smaller, it doesn't make a difference. Therefore, they remain truly humble. And that's how you make sure that when you're looking at someone else, you never judge them because you're not in their shoes. And you don't know their circumstances, you don't know their upbringing, you don't know their natural impulses to evil, you don't know what's going on inside them, you don't know what they struggle with, and there's certainly something that you can find, right? Anytime you find yourself looking at someone else and judging them, it's a moment to look at you, to turn inwards and reflect on what in myself, which part of my struggle am I failing at, right? And compare that part to this person. All of a sudden, you're on a lower level than them.
But it's also, evil is to blame. It's not the person, right? Like evil chose somebody to do this bad thing.
So the Alter Rebbe already addressed this all the way at the beginning of the chapter. We mentioned it maybe only in passing. The Alter Rebbe said, no. For the person, meaning your statement is correct if you look at if it's you looking at the other person. And actually in chapter 32 of Tanya, which we're going to learn in 3 weeks from now at the event, when Rabbi Miller is going to give his VIP class, the topic is going to be that, how to not look at a person's negative, but the negative which is inside the person, which has nothing to do with them. That's a whole different discussion. That's how to love a person despite the fact that they might do things that are wrong. But here we're talking about the fact that person himself, it's not an excuse. Because it's very easy to say, meaning with regards to our own battle, we can always say, it's not us, it's our Yetzer Hara, it's not me, it's my Yetzer Hara that wants to do that. Yes, but the fact of the matter is that no matter what's going on, Hashem always, right? Zelu mazas Hashem Elokim. Hashem always wants us to have freedom of choice. And therefore he balances the playing field. So Marguerite, when you were talking about how it's so annoying, sometimes whenever that thing happens, whenever that thought comes in or that feeling or whatever it is that seems to oppose everything that you really want to do, there's always an equal side on the good that's there that could overpower it.
So if I'm thinking about doing something which is not good to do, but it's
you always have it in you to overpower that. The ability is there. Hashem has placed it inside you. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a fair playing field.
How should I apply to this overpower? Should
you have to work.
Dive in this moment?
No. You have to work. You have to work. Hashem doesn't want you. If He wanted to do the work, He could have done it originally. He didn't create you.
Yeah, that
right?
was so great. I will be broken.
That would have been easier, huh? Yeah. As an example, the Gemara in Bava Basra, right, has there's a statement that I think it's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's son that said, he said, This statement, Rabbi Yehuda the tailor wrote it. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai looked at him and said, stop it. Don't talk Lashon Hara. He wasn't talking Lashon Hara, he was saying a statement, he was saying a fact about the person, that he was a tailor. Right? But obviously on the level that he was
demeaning himself.
He was demeaning him in whatever way it was. Even though it wasn't actually demeaning, and to most people you still call somebody a tailor, there's nothing wrong with that. But on the level that he was, this was his struggle. This was what he needed to work on. Isn't that interesting? That even one of the most holy Tanaim ever, and sometimes, this is the bless. This is the curse sometimes of being aware. In other words, the more Torah we learn, the higher
It's expected.
and the higher the struggle is. It might be an easier struggle, but it's on a much higher level, right? So, but that doesn't take away from it. And this is why we say sometimes that meaning when somebody is well versed in Torah and he doesn't keep Shabbos, then he can be blamed for it. Someone who doesn't know, that Rebbe always used to call them tinokot shenishbu lebein ha'amim, right? Like a young child who was brought up by non-Jews, right, and has no clue what's going on. To them, ignorance is bliss, literally, right? The Talmud actually says in Bava Metzia that an ignorant, someone, an amaretz, a regular person who's brought up and he's not told about the Torah, the mitzvot, whatever, etc. When he transgresses the will of Hashem, it's considered as if he did it inadvertently, as if he doesn't want to do it, it's done by mistake. Not so with regards to somebody who knows that he's not supposed to be doing it. But I think the lesson here is clear. That no matter what level a person is, there's always what should be compared is the struggle. And all of a sudden you realize that it's incomparable. Your struggle is your struggle and her struggle is her struggle. And that is...
The struggles are as unique as the personality.
Of course, and the struggles are as unique as the personalities, because what the word that we use called personality is essentially a combination of the person's circumstances and his upbringing and his natural impulses, etc. All that.
The level of difficulty in overcoming the struggle means a lot.
Exactly. The level of difficulty in the struggle, that's what God values. And as compared to you, as compared to your abilities, right? How much effort you invest into overcoming it. That's why when we look at someone else, we have to make sure that when we look at someone else, it should always make you feel humble. Because you can't judge anyone until you're standing in their place. And with this we conclude chapter 30 of Jewish Mysticism Lessons in Tanya, How Not to Judge Others.